In this Advent season, there are so many things to look forward to, but it can also just feel like a time of weariness, of loneliness, of unmet expectations, and it often just doesn't fully go to plan, or our hope for that magical season isn't quite fulfilled. But what we are reminded about in the Bible is that rejoicing isn't actually dependent on those things. It's not dependent on today's circumstances. Rejoicing is a state of being, it's a position, and we get to choose to keep taking that up no matter what is going on around us. And we can feel that so much in this particular season. And a verse that I just keep coming back to this year is what Paul reminds us in Philippians in chapter 4. That even when we are falling out with friends, even when we're discouraged, even when we're anxious, rejoicing is still available to us. And he writes in Philippians chapter 4, reading from verse 1 to 9, he says, "Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord. In this way, dear friends, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God will transcend all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have heard or received or learned from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." He says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. And I just come back to this passage so often because it's a beautiful encouragement. But it also is so evident that it comes in the midst of Paul talking about a fallout. There's two women in this church who have disagreed about an issue that was significant enough for Paul to point it out. But he so quickly goes on to encourage them to stay in their community, to help one another, and to agree in the Lord. And then he goes on to write, rejoice in the Lord. And in both instances, there's just this great weight to the action that he's telling them to do. It's not just because it's a nice thing to do. It's not for their own benefit or just because with no real foundation. It's because they are in the Lord. And that is such a solid and sure foundation. And then he writes, the Lord is near. And that is our reason to rejoice. He doesn't just command us to rejoice, but he enables us to, because he's present and he is here. And he's listening to our prayers and he is eager to hear more. And he's inviting us in to be in the Lord. And especially at Christmas time, I'm just drawn to how amongst all those lovely and good things that he writes about that are true and honest and joyful, that actually a couple of times Paul returns to the peace, and that all these things bring peace. In verse 7, he says, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds. And in verse 9, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. The other parts in this verse can be actions for us to do and to practice. Rejoice, be reasonable, pray, think about these things. There's things for us to do. But the peace isn't something we can do or tick off the list. The peace is the consequence. And the peace is the gift that God gives us, that we can know his peace in the times of trouble and in the times of happiness, because we can rejoice through all of them. And he is ready to guard our hearts and minds alongside us.